Jung's most unsettling discovery wasn't simply about healing trauma. It was about the final stage of the empath after narcissistic abuse, and why this transformation either breaks them entirely or forges something psychologically unprecedented. In his clinical work, Jung documented empaths who had endured systematic narcissistic manipulation and reached what he regarded as the final stage of empathic development, individuals who underwent a complete psychological metamorphosis. These were not ordinary recovery stories. They were cases in which empaths emerged with what Jung described as integrated shadow consciousness and a striking immunity to manipulation. He called this discovery dangerous because empaths who arrived at this final stage often became unrecognizable to those who knew them before. They had developed what he described as sovereign empathy, the ability to feel profoundly while staying psychologically untouchable, a level of consciousness Jung rarely encountered. Today, I'll share Jung's most challenging insight about the empath's final stage after narcissistic abuse, and why he believed this devastating experience either annihilates empathic sensitivity or transforms it into what he called the archetypal wounded healer, a mode of consciousness beyond both victim and survivor. The case that revealed this began in 1928 with a patient Jung referred to in private notes only as M, a 34-year-old woman whose empathic gifts had drawn increasingly destructive narcissistic partners. When she first came to Jung, she was, in his words, psychically dissolved, her sense of self so eroded she could barely distinguish her emotions from those around her. Yet over the next 2 years, Jung documented something extraordinary. M did not merely recover. She underwent an alchemical transformation through shadow integration. Where she had once been permeable to every emotional current, she developed what Jung called conscious permeability, the ability to choose precisely what to absorb and what to deflect. Jung wrote in his notes, "M has achieved something I previously thought impossible, complete empathic sovereignty. She can enter the depths of another's pain without drowning in it. She detects deception with uncanny accuracy. Most remarkably, she has become immune to manipulation while retaining her capacity for genuine compassion." The transformation was so complete that Jung wondered if M was, in essence, the same person. Her family noticed the change immediately. Once the household's emotional caretaker, she now set boundaries that felt unbreakable. Former friends accused her of becoming cold or different, but Jung recognized something profound. M had reached the final stage of empathic development he had only theorized. He even noted that M's eyes had changed. "They hold depths I've never seen," he wrote, "as if she has looked into the abyss of human nature and emerged not broken, but wise." Jung realized narcissistic abuse creates what he termed the empathic crucible, a psychological pressure chamber that either destroys empathy entirely or refines it into something stronger. The key lies in what he called shadow integration through forced individuation. During narcissistic abuse, the empath is relentlessly pushed to face their own shadow, the parts of themselves they disown or reject. The narcissist, Jung observed, acts as an unconscious shadow mirror, reflecting back the empath's capacities for manipulation, selfishness, and emotional detachment. Jung documented that empaths typically pass through what he called the 3 deaths. 1. The death of the idealized self-image as purely good and giving. 2. The death of the belief that love can heal anyone. 3. The death of the need for external validation to feel worthy. The empath must face their own shadow, Jung wrote, not through gentle introspection, but through brutal confrontation with their capacity for darkness. The narcissist unknowingly becomes the catalyst for this essential psychological work. Those who survive this crucible develop what he called integrated empathy, the ability to feel without fixing, to understand without taking responsibility, and to love without losing themselves. This is not numbness, it is emotional mastery. The neurological shift Jung observed was profound. These empaths retained their sensitivity, yet gained what he described as conscious filtering capacity. They could sense everything but choose what to process. Jung compared this to advanced meditation masters, attained here not through spiritual practice, but through suffering and transformation. But Jung also discovered something deeply troubling about empaths who reached this final stage. They often became isolated, not by choice, but by necessity. The very transformation that made them psychologically powerful rendered them fundamentally incompatible with unconscious people. He documented that these evolved empaths could no longer tolerate what he called psychological unconsciousness in others. They could instantly detect when someone was operating from ego projection or manipulation. This created what Jung termed the consciousness gap, an unbridgeable divide between those who had integrated their shadow and those who remained unaware of it. M described the experience like this: "It's as if I can see the psychological machinery of everyone around me, their defenses, projections, and hidden motivations. It's all transparent now, but this clarity has cost me nearly every relationship I had." Jung recognized this as the hidden danger of empathic evolution. These individuals had developed what he called archetypal sight, the ability to see past persona and into the deeper patterns driving human behavior. While this made them powerful healers and guides, it also made ordinary social interaction difficult, sometimes nearly impossible. "They have eaten from the tree of psychological knowledge," Jung wrote, "and like Adam and Eve, they cannot return to the garden of unconscious innocence." A further disturbance: many people instinctively feared these evolved empaths. Others could sense, often unconsciously, that such individuals could see through psychological defenses. This gave rise to what Jung called the prophet's isolation, being rejected not for being wrong, but for seeing too clearly. He recorded cases where families, friends, and even fellow clinicians grew uncomfortable around these individuals, sensing the piercing insight without understanding what they were reacting to. Through extensive observation, Jung identified 4 pathways empaths tend to take after narcissistic abuse, only one of which leads to the final stage of development. Type 1, the dissolved empath. These empaths never fully regain a stable sense of self. Jung described them as psychic ghosts, present but not truly alive, unable to distinguish their feelings from others, living in constant emotional chaos. They often develop what he called perpetual victim consciousness, repeatedly re-entering similar abusive dynamics. Type 2, the armored empath. These empaths protect themselves by shutting down their empathic capacities entirely. They erect psychological fortresses around the heart. While they avoid further abuse, they also lose access to their gift. They often become cynical and emotionally disconnected, choosing safety over authenticity. Type 3, the wounded healer. These empaths transform their pain into service. Admirable, yes, but Jung warned this type can remain trapped in compulsive rescue patterns. They set clearer boundaries, yet still derive worth from being needed. Without fuller shadow integration, they remain vulnerable to more sophisticated manipulation. Type 4, the sovereign empath. This is Jung's final stage, empaths who have integrated their gifts with their shadow elements. They have become conscious vessels, he wrote, able to hold the full spectrum of human experience without being depleted or corrupted by it. Sovereign empaths feel others' emotions without taking responsibility for them. They detect manipulation instantly and respond with compassion rather than rage. They maintain boundaries without building walls. And they develop what Jung called archetypal wisdom, an understanding of human behavior at its deepest levels. The key difference: they have embraced their own shadow. They no longer project disowned darkness onto others, which makes them immune to the psychological hooks narcissists use. Yet Jung outlined several dangers in reaching this stage that made him question whether the evolution was worth the cost. The isolation factor. Sovereign empaths often live in profound solitude. They have outgrown the psychological level of most people, he wrote. Like adults trying to relate to children, the gap in consciousness becomes a divide. Many report feeling like aliens within their own families and communities. The burden of sight. These empaths cannot unsee the patterns driving human behavior. Jung noted frequent archetypal fatigue, exhaustion from continually witnessing the same unconscious dramas play out. They predict relationship failures, see through political manipulation, and detect emotional patterns long before they surface. The weight of responsibility. Many sovereign empaths feel burdened by their abilities. They can see solutions to others' problems, yet they know unsolicited insight is rarely welcomed. Jung called this the Cassandra complex, accurate perception that others reject or cannot understand. The demand for authenticity. Perhaps most challenging, these empaths can no longer tolerate inauthenticity in themselves or in others. They become truth sensors, immediately noticing when someone is being false or manipulative. This reality makes social maintenance difficult. They have achieved psychological mastery, Jung wrote, but at the cost of ordinary connection. They have become bridges between the conscious and the unconscious, but bridges are walked upon, not embraced. The most dangerous risk Jung identified was archetypal possession, becoming so identified with the role of healer or truth teller that one loses contact with ordinary humanity. To guide recovery, Jung developed what he called the shadow integration protocol specifically for empaths healing from narcissistic abuse. It wasn't traditional therapy, it was psychological alchemy, transforming the lead of trauma into the gold of wisdom. Stage 1. Shadow acknowledgement. Empaths must first admit their own capacities for manipulation, selfishness, and cruelty. You cannot integrate what you refuse to own, Jung wrote. This means recognizing how empathic gifts can be used to control, how victimhood can become a weapon, and how goodness can mask deeper needs. Stage 2. Projection withdrawal. Jung taught empaths to systematically withdraw projections from the narcissist, recognizing that the narcissist's grandiosity mirrors the empath's disowned desire for recognition, that manipulation mirrors their own subtle controlling impulses, and that lack of empathy mirrors their hidden emotional numbness. Stage 3. Boundary alchemy. Instead of building walls, practice conscious permeability, choosing moment by moment what to absorb and what to deflect. This involves cultivating empathic discernment, feeling without fixing, understanding without rescuing, and loving without self-abandonment. Stage 4. Archetypal alignment. The final stage is aligning with the wounded healer archetype, accepting that suffering has prepared them for a role within the collective psyche. This is not about becoming a professional helper. It is about embodying the integration of wisdom and compassion that Jung believed is essential for human evolution. Jung outlined practical exercises for each stage: shadow dialoguing, consciously conversing with disowned parts; empathic fasting, periods of deliberate non-absorption; and archetypal meditation, connecting with deeper organizing patterns of behavior. The crucial insight Jung emphasized is that empaths must stop trying to return to who they were before the abuse. The chrysalis cannot become a caterpillar again. The goal is not recovery, but metamorphosis. To understand what determines the outcome, Jung studied historical figures and patients to see who achieved sovereign consciousness and who was destroyed by sensitivity. Success pattern. Jung himself. In private reflections, Jung admitted that much of his theory emerged from surviving what he called psychological persecution by authority figures who tried to manipulate his empathic nature. "My tormentors became my teachers," he wrote, forcing me to develop the tools that became my life's work. He achieved sovereign empathy by refusing bitterness, by studying his persecutors as psychological specimens rather than personal enemies, and by transforming his insights into service. His path became a template for integration. Success pattern. Documented cases. Jung recorded patients who achieved similar integration. 1. A composer who survived an abusive marriage. channeled trauma into music Jung described as archetypal, speaking directly to the collective unconscious. Another, a physician, developed unprecedented diagnostic clarity after withstanding manipulation by colleagues. The through line, Jung observed, was viewing abuse as initiation rather than mere victimization, experience as preparation for purpose. Failure pattern, the gifted who didn't integrate. Jung also studied empaths destroyed by their sensitivity. They fell into one of two traps, remaining identified as victims, using trauma as primary identity, or becoming wounded wounders, using psychological insight to manipulate and control. The difference between the sovereign empath and the destroyed empath, Jung wrote, is not the severity of trauma, but the willingness to turn poison into medicine. The failure pattern always involved shadow rejection, refusing to acknowledge one's capacity for the very behaviors that caused harm. Recognizing the new relational needs of sovereign empaths, Jung articulated a consciousness compatibility framework to help them build authentic connections. Recognition signals. Evolved empaths can be recognized by their ability to discuss psychology without defensiveness, comfort with paradox and contradiction, lack of need to be right or superior, and what Jung called archetypal humor, the capacity to find lightness within dark patterns. Safe relationship characteristics. Healthy bonds include mutual respect for boundaries, comfortable silence without forced chatter, the ability to discuss shadow material without judgment, and what Jung termed conscious intimacy, connection based on authentic self-revelation rather than projection. Community building strategies. Jung recommended that sovereign empaths seek others who have undergone transformative experiences, not only narcissistic abuse, but any event that forced rapid psychological evolution. Trauma survivors, spiritual practitioners who have faced their shadow, and people who navigated major life transitions often make compatible companions. He warned against maintaining ties with the psychologically unconscious out of guilt or obligation. The butterfly cannot pretend to be a caterpillar, he wrote. Doing so serves no one and dishonors the transformation. He also advocated archetypal service, using evolved empathy to serve the collective through teaching, healing, creating, or simply modeling an integrated life. Jung mapped the transformation from wounded empath to sovereign empath as 5 metamorphoses, each marked by specific inner shifts and challenges. Metamorphosis 1. Dissolution. During active abuse, the previous identity collapses. It feels like psychological death, but it is ego dissolution that prepares the ground. Jung called it blessed disintegration, the destruction of false self-concepts. Metamorphosis 2. The descent post-abuse. The empath enters a voluntary underworld journey, facing the shadow, acknowledging participation in the dynamic, and confronting fears about worth and lovability. This often looks like depression, but it is psychological composting. Metamorphosis 3. Integration. The empath consciously chooses what shadow elements to embrace and what to transform. This is selective shadow incorporation, feeling anger without cruelty, acknowledging selfishness without becoming narcissistic, owning power without manipulation. Metamorphosis 4. Emergence. Empathic abilities return in a refined form. Empaths at this stage can feel others' emotions without compulsion to fix, detect manipulation yet respond with compassion, and love deeply without losing center. Metamorphosis 5. Sovereignty. The final stage is archetypal consciousness, the capacity to see beyond individual psychology into larger human patterns. These empaths become conscious bridges between personal and transpersonal realms. Jung observed that each metamorphosis typically takes 6-18 months, and the overall process 3-7 years of intentional work, though the timeline varies with one's willingness to face shadow and commit to integration rather than mere symptom relief. He also warned of traps that can derail transformation. The spiritual superiority trap. After glimpsing evolved abilities, some become spiritually grandiose, believing trauma makes them more enlightened. True sovereignty includes humility. The moment someone believes they are beyond shadow, Jung wrote, they are possessed by it. The perpetual healing trap. Some become addicted to transformation itself, collecting modalities without integrating gains. Jung called this therapeutic materialism, treating healing as consumption rather than embodiment. The isolation addiction trap. While solitude is necessary, using evolution as an excuse to avoid all human connection is regression. The sovereign empath serves consciousness through engagement, not withdrawal. The revenge trap. Some use evolved insight to subtly punish those who hurt them. True integration turns revenge into compassion for the unconscious, Jung wrote. For maintenance, Jung recommended daily shadow check-ins, regularly examining motivations, projections, and emotional reactions to remain conscious of one's inner process. Jung's final insight about sovereign empaths may be his most profound. He believed they represent an evolutionary step in human consciousness, essential for our collective psychological development. The sovereign empath, he wrote, may embody the next stage of human evolution, individuals capable of feeling the full spectrum of experience while remaining centered in their own truth. They are a bridge between ego consciousness and self-realization. As humanity faces increasing psychological complexity, Jung believed these evolved empaths will serve as consciousness midwives, helping others navigate shadow integration and empathic development. Their suffering, he concluded, is not merely personal, it is archetypal. They have endured a shared human story of abuse and emerged with medicine the species needs for its next step. The empath who survives narcissistic abuse and reaches Jung's final stage undergoes the ultimate individuation, becoming fully themselves while serving something larger than themselves. Jung's most unsettling discovery reveals that the deepest wounds, when integrated, become humanity's greatest gifts. The sovereign empath stands as proof that consciousness can rise from catastrophe, that wisdom can be forged from pain, and that the very experiences that seem designed to destroy us may, in fact, be designed to transform us. As Jung wrote in his closing reflections on this phenomenon, the narcissist unknowingly serves as the dark priest of the empath's initiation. Through cruelty, they forge the very consciousness that will one day heal what they represent. If you recognize yourself in this arc of empathic evolution, claim it. I am becoming sovereign. Your transformation serves not only your healing, but humanity's evolution. Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension.